Has Jake Paul earned a world title opportunity? Welcome back to the Knockdown, where we talk about the biggest topics in the sport of boxing. I'm Chris Mannix. Joining me this week is longtime boxing broadcaster Corey Erdman. And Corey, we've got to start with the big fight from this past weekend. Tampa, Florida. Jake Paul back in action. And when Jake Paul fights, usually it means an MMA fighter goes down. This time, it was Mike Perry, the former UFC fighter turned bare knuckle champion, who gets knocked out by Jake Paul in the 6th round of their cruiserweight fight. Now, in the aftermath of this fight, Corey, Gilberto Mendoza, who is the president of the WBA, went on social media and suggested that he was ready to sanction a fight between Jake Paul and former middleweight champion Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., who competed on the undercard of this event for a championship belt. So I'll ask you this. Has Jake Paul earned a world title opportunity?
In BKFC, maybe. I mean, I could make a strong argument that given the number he just did on the face of BKFC, even though it was in gloved boxing, that if he wants to hop over to BKFC and fight Mick Terrell for the BKFC heavyweight title, I think you can make a strong argument that he has earned that. As for whether he's earned a actual world title shot in professional gloved boxing? No, obviously not. But if the WBA wants to create a title or pick one of its regional titles to put on the line so that he can face Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., no, he didn't earn that, but it's also not something that's all that unusual in the sport of boxing or for the WBA. So what I think this will represent is the path for Jake Paul to enter the world rankings, which would then mean the possibility of Jake Paul fighting for a world title. Realistically, when you use the word earn, do I think that there is a legitimate path for Jake Paul to earn a world title shot? That is to say, he goes through the rankings and he beats a Mateus Masternak or a Junior Dorticos or some of those contenders that are beneath the world titles. Absolutely not. But is there a path within the present framework of sanctioning bodies in boxing for him to legally, and I'm using air quotes for those who aren't watching this on video, legally get himself a world title shot? That path is basically being laid at his feet right now.
Yeah, I think the wording of the tweet from Gilberto Mendoza was specifically non-specific. It wasn't, has Jake Paul earned a shot at our world cruiserweight title? I'm sure that would have sparked widespread outrage on the internet because no, Jake Paul has not earned that type of opportunity. I think Jake Paul probably the first one that would tell you he has yet to earn that type of opportunity. Now, the Chavez Jr. fight has been in the water supply for some time. Chavez Jr. a long way removed from being the middleweight champion of the world. His last fight against Uriah Hall, 6th round decision, where it could have gone either way. And that's a fight that, 10 years ago, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. probably would have won with relative ease. So Chavez is nowhere near his best, but he does have that ex-title holder sort of cachet. And I can see Jake Paul fighting him as early as potentially the end of this year if the Mike Tyson fight doesn't happen in November as planned. But no, it does not belong in a world title mix. If he wants to fight for a secondary belt, a makeup belt, some kind of belt the WBA wants to create for him, to your point, I would say yes, I am all for it. But I think Jake Paul would need multiple fights against top 15, top 20 ranked fighters in that sanctioning body's organizational chart in order for him to be worthy of that type of fight. So the other big news from this week is that Vasily Lomachenko is going to take the rest of the calendar year off. Lomachenko, now the IBF 135-pound champion, multi-division world champion, coming off a decisive win over George Kambosos, was rumored to be in the hunt for a fight against Gervonta Davis, who is the WBA version of the 135-pound champion and one of the most popular fighters in all of boxing. A Lomachenko-Davis fight would have been a huge event, Corey. So it was a shock to see Lomachenko decide to walk away, at least for now, from that fight. And after Lomachenko's been campaigning for so long for a fight on that level. It makes me wonder, does he deserve criticism for walking away from that fight?
I think he's going to receive it, but I think that you're asking the question to one of the more lenient judges in the world of boxing when it comes to, criticizing fighters for wanting to fight or not wanting to fight. My first reaction when this came out was, okay, I mean, something must be going on. And I think that as we heard more from Lomachenko's team, the wording being used was kind of like his heart isn't in it right now. And I don't know specifically why that might be, but my mind immediately goes to look what's going on where he's from. Look what's going on in Ukraine. And I know he hasn't specifically cited that, but when something happens involving a Ukrainian athlete, a Ukrainian fighter, and they say, my heart isn't in this, I'm not focused, or I don't want to be focused on my profession right now, I want to give leniency, because how could you? And again, Lomachenko hasn't said that. I don't know what his reasons are, but I do know that Lomachenko has been an extremely high-level boxer for an extremely long time. And if he's reached that point of burnout when it comes to competition, when it comes to training, I'm willing to give him grace and say, okay, that's fine. I think he will receive the criticism, because it seemed basically up until 2 days ago like he was gung-ho for this, that he was searching for this kind of fight, and then when it got to the point of negotiations, that he backed out. And that might not be what happened, but I know that that's what the public is going to think. And unfortunately, that's going to be the PR battle that he's going to have to fight, particularly from fans of Tank Davis.
I'll put it this way. I don't think he deserves criticism for walking away, but I don't think he can expect sympathy if he doesn't get the big fights he might want in 2025. If he can't get Tank again in 2025, if he can't get a unification fight with Shakur Stevenson, this was his opportunity to take one step closer to becoming the undisputed champion. If he wants to walk away from it, that is entirely his business. And in fact, I think it's best that fighters who are not all the way in to not step all the way in, to in fact step all the way out, because boxing is a dangerous game and you don't want to do it half-heartedly. So I'll give him credit for that. But moving forward, if he can't get the kind of fights he has been looking for and calling for many years now, he has kind of lost the ability to gain sympathy for that. So let's talk now about a fight that you are working on Saturday. Claressa Shields, three-time undisputed champion, 154, 160, and 168. She is trying to pull off the rare double play where she is moving up to 175 pounds to fight for a vacant light heavyweight title, while also competing for the heavyweight belt that is held by Vanessa Joannis. Corey, we've seen Claressa in high-profile fights over the last couple of years. This will be her second straight fight at Little Caesars Arena in Detroit. But it's not the mega fight that we've been used to seeing some women involved in. Most recently, Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano. So we'll ask you this. Is this the best option for Claressa Shields?
I think it is the best option for Claressa Shields right now. I mean, the big issue for Claressa, frankly, throughout her career, but especially now at this point in her career, is it's always a search for competition. And she's been seeking that and has seldom truly found it. You know, you think of the one knockdown at the hands of Hannah Gabriels, then she goes on to dominate that fight. And then, of course, the fight against Savannah Marshall, you know, a true rival that she conclusively wins that fight as well. At this point, she probably can't find that name brand rival. So what she has to chase is titles, and she has to chase events. And in this case, with the WBC's version of the heavyweight title on the line and then the WBO's light heavyweight title on the line, she kind of pulls the Sugar Ray Leonard, Donnie Lalonde move where, you know, she'll pick up titles in two more weight classes. And then that cachet of being heavyweight champion, it's buzzworthy. It's going to make headlines. And where Claressa's at right now, it just didn't seem realistic for her to cut down to 147 to take on some of the names that could be there at 147 or south of there. for her body, it seemed to make sense for her to live up here. She's not going to have to cut really any weight. She can probably just train normally and keep her normal physical mass on and enter this fight. And she's going to enter this fight justifiably as a major favorite against Vanessa Lepage-Joannis, who has, really one good win on her resume, the one where she won the heavyweight title against Abril Vidal. Vidal's a fighter who gave Hannah Gabriel some problems. So, you look at the level of opposition. Lepage is basically in the neighborhood of the types of fighters, the Mary Cornejos of the world that Claressa has been beating in the interim of fights like the ones against Savannah Marshall. But what I think this potentially sets up, and we're talking about titles, we're talking about events as realistically what she can chase right now. If she wins this fight, you could maybe look at a unification fight against Lanny Daniels in New Zealand. And that presents at least an interesting event and possibility. It's a unification fight. In fact, they wanted to make that fight before Daniels suffered an injury, so they went with Lepage-Joannis instead. But I'm dreaming, I'm putting my promoter hat on. Maybe you have a unification fight in New Zealand. You do the type of thing that we've seen with promotions like we just talked about Lomachenko and Kambosos, Haney and Kambosos, some of the Matchroom shows that take part in Matchroom. You get some money from federal and municipal governments, the tourism departments, and suddenly you make it a thing. And maybe you see Claressa Shields in an arena, maybe a stadium in New Zealand. I think that's just what's realistic for her right now.
All right, Corey, great stuff, man. Thanks for joining me.